Welcome back to math class with Miss Tamal. Great work solving the last set of multiplicative comparison story problems. I really saw that you crushed being able to find the greater amount in all of those story problems. Now get ready for part two. For this lesson, you'll need two materials. One will be your math packet. You're going to turn to page 25. That is where we'll start. And you'll also need a pencil. Grab those two materials and let's get ready to put our foot on the pedal and crush multiplicative comparison. Let's get started with a review. So, what have we learned about multiplicative comparison so far? Go ahead and start sharing out every single thing that you know. Mm-hmm. Nice. So we know about the factors, right? So when we think about the first factor in that multiplication equation, it represents the times as many. What are some other terms that you can use to talk about that type of comparison? Yes, times as much. Uh-huh. Times greater. Look out for all of them because it tells you it is multiplicative comparison. All right, and so our second factor, it represents the lesser amount in a multiplicative comparison. Nice work. I bet you know what's coming next. Talk to me about the product. Yes, that represents the greater amount. Shine for you. You really know a multiplicative comparison number sentence and what each part of it stands for. Now, let's talk about our two key big ideas that we've learned so far. My turn first. When both subjects are listed in the comparison statement and there are whole numbers greater than one, the first subject in the times as many statement is the greater amount. Yes, yes, you've got that cadence. You want to do it again? I love learning, so let's go ahead. When both subjects are listed in the comparison statement and there are whole numbers greater than one, the first subject in the times as many statement is the greater amount. Lock it in. Now, if you notice, this big idea says when both subjects are listed. We've seen some examples when both subjects are not listed. Sometimes it's missing the subject at the end. And when it is, we can just add in a little caret and write as to fill it in. Or sometimes the subject in the beginning is referred to by a pronoun. We call that the pronoun antecedents. And that's when that pronoun is really referring back to a previous statement in which the subject was mentioned. So be on the lookout for when you need to draw that connection arrow back. Alrighty, now that we have these big ideas in mind, let's go ahead and dive a little deeper by reading a story problem. This is a little bit of mental math where I want you to not write down the story problem. You don't have to solve, but I do want you to think, what is the greater subject and possibly amount if it's mentioned? And then what is the lesser subject and then possibly amount if it's mentioned? All right, let's see our story problem. Miss Jackson loves two songs, Baby Shark and Little Einsteins. She played Baby Shark 20 times in one day. That is 5 times the number of times she played Little Einsteins. How many times did she play Little Einsteins? All right, take a moment, reread it on your own, and think what is the greater subject and amount if it's listed? And then what is the lesser subject and amount if it's listed? Let's talk about it. All right, so talk to me about the greater subject. Uh-huh. Ah, I'm hearing some of us say Baby Shark, some of us are saying Little Einsteins. Which one do we think it is? Nice. I love that justification. We're thinking that Baby Shark is the greater amount. Why? Because although when we look at the comparison statement that's right here, it doesn't mention Baby Shark, we do see this word that. That acts like a pronoun. And it knows that we are referring back to what was mentioned in the previous statement or sentence, which is Baby Shark. So Baby Shark is our greater amount, shine to you. And now what's our lesser amount? Yes, it's Little Einsteins. That's our lesser subject. Is there amount with it? Nope. Let's go back to the greater subject. Is there amount with it? 20 times she listened to that song. All right, let's push you. What is the answer? How many times did she play Little Einsteins? Ding, 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 ding. Nice. It is 4 times. That's because that was the lesser amount. Really great work. So now it's time. Buckle up, sit up straight, make sure you're in that seat, ready to rock, because on your marks, get set. And today, we are going to see if you can solve some story problems. But let's see who is not going to get tricked by the language in the problem because they are using their habits. So let's go over those habits. And when we're thinking about identifying subjects, one, we need to spot check. Are there whole numbers greater than 1? And we need those because that's how we know we can apply our big idea. And then we're going to look out for the times as many statement because that's our comparison statement that we're going to zoom into to start marking up our problem. Next, we want to circle the subjects being compared within the comparison statement that we've double underlined. Next, we want to write an inequality using the symbols less than or greater than to show which subjects are lesser or greater. And then finally, we're going to use our comparison when we annotate the subjects for TLG and also transfer that knowledge to our key. So those were our habits. So let's fuel with a new story problem today. Let's reread it and think about this story problem. Mr. Fraser is getting ready to play his favorite math game with his class, but he needs to collect all his materials. He has 48 dice, which is 2 times as many dice as Miss Hammett has. Mr. Fraser also needs 3 times as many tiles as the number of dice that Miss Hammond has. How many tiles does Mr. Fraser need to play his favorite math game? Let's read it one more time. And as we're reading it, I love that some of your lights, I see it in your eyes, the lights are flashing because you're starting to analyze the story problem for its complexity. Let's go ahead and read again. Mr. Fraser is getting ready to play his favorite math game with his class, but first he needs to collect all his materials. He has 48 dice, which is 2 times as many dice as Miss Hammett has. Mr. Fraser also needs 3 times as many tiles as the number of dice that Miss Hammett has. How many tiles does Mr. Fraser need to play his favorite math game? We are now going to start to analyze this multi-step story problem. And I'm sure you probably saw, because we practiced this last time, that this story problem has what we call a double comparison. So let's analyze thinking about these 5 questions. Take a moment on your own to read the questions. Awesome. Now go back to page 25 in your packet. And as you reread the questions, I want you to think through your answers to these questions based on your analysis of your story problem. Feel free to press play when you're ready to continue. Let's continue. So how many multiplicative comparisons are in this problem? We named it already. It is 2. It is a double comparison. And we see because it uses that language of times as many, times as much, 2 times. Now, what are the subjects being compared in each comparison? This one's a little bit more complicated than yesterday, but guess what? We still have it. We'll show lots of effort today. The number of dice Mr. Fraser has to the number of dice Miss Hammett has, that's our first comparison. And then our second comparison, the number of tiles Mr. Fraser has to the number of dice Miss Hammett has. Now, which subjects are known and which subjects are unknown? Good job. So we know the number of dice Mr. Fraser has, but what we do not know is the number of dice Miss Hammett has and the number of tiles Mr. Fraser has or needs. And so will any of the subjects become known after solving just that first step? Okay. So yes, the number of dice that Miss Hammett has will become known. And then which subject is greater? Which is listed first in each comparison? I gave you a sneak peek. So we know that the first comparison, the number of dice Mr. Fraser has is greater. And then in the second comparison, the number of tiles Mr. Fraser has is greater. So hold on, take a mental picture of this because now after we finished our analysis, we're going to go into our visualization. And so let's start our visualization by doing a retell. So use your mental movie. What are you envisioning? And now, who or what is this story problem about? Where are they? What are they doing? When does this happen? What do we know? What don't we know? And remember, you don't need to focus on exact values, just the actions and relationships. So let's hear you retell it. Feel free to retell it to anyone around you, your sister, your pet, your little brother, your older brother, and then also retell it to me so that I can also hear that you're making sure to mention the relationships and actions and not focusing on the values. I'm listening. Great retell. So now it's time to create and you can act it out. So it's time for lights, camera, and bring the drama and get into character. Describe the settings, the characters, and also the plot, your actions and relationships, your known and unknowns, and then the units, but do not include the exact values. Use props to visualize the context. Improvise. Let's see it. What will you have to represent the dice? Notice I still have my marbles, but today they're going to be dice. Nice. Okay, so now you acted it out to me. Try to act it out to someone else. Great. So let's now use all of this. We really spent a lot of time analyzing, visualizing, Mr. Mall, and creating. So now we get a time to mark it up. So let's go ahead, and as we mark it up, you're going to join me. So have your pencil ready to go. I'm going to put it on the big screen. So let's reread it one more time and start with just our multiplicative comparison habits. Mr. Frazier is getting ready to play his favorite math game with his class, but first he needs to collect all his materials. I'm not marking that sentence up because remember, there is no times as many. This is just providing me with context. Let's keep reading. He has 48 dice, which is 2 times as many dice as Miss Hammett has. I am just going to continue because I see some information I want to mark up, but I want to read for everything because I'm also doing my spot checks. Mr. Frazier also needs 3 times as many tiles as the number of dice that Miss Hammett has. How many tiles does Mr. Frazier need to play his favorite math game? Read it again. We can never read it enough. Time to spot check. I started while I was reading and I saw the number 48, 3, and 2. But that 2 almost missed me. So I'm going to cross it out and write it in number form. All of these are whole numbers greater than 1. So we can continue. Now we're going to continue to spot check looking for our times as many. So I saw it when I was reading over here. 2 times as many. I'm going to double underline that. You can go ahead and make your paper look like mine as well. And we're going to label that with what? L? No, right? It's the times as many. Silly. Now, to make that sentence really, really pop, so I know that this is where I'm focusing, let's go ahead and bracket it. So this is the capital that starts the sentence. Where's the period? Here's the period that ends the sentence. Now let's go ahead and think about our greater and our lesser subject. So what is the greater subject? What subject do we have here first? Tricky, right? It's okay. He has 48 dice, which is 2 times as many dice as Miss Hammett has. Yes, so we're going to circle this dice and also he, and I'm almost going to put them together because this tells me that Mr. Frazier, when we see this pronoun he, is really the person who has the dice. And we know that because that subject is coming first in that sentence, that is the greater amount. Because what is our statement? Our big idea? Yes, when there are whole numbers greater than 1. The first subject in the times as many statement is the greater amount. So that's my greater amount. Talk to me about the lesser amount. What is it? Mm-hmm. Yes. So we see here, if we're comparing Mr. Fraser's dice, then we have to compare a subject that's kind of similar. When we're thinking about the dice that Miss Hammett has. So I'm going to circle all of this and I'm going to label it with an L. Nice job. So we just did our first comparison statement. Let's go on to the second one. Reread. Mr. Fraser also needs 3 times as many tiles as the number of dice that Miss Hammett has. I'm going to underline times as many, and that's our what? T, yes. Now let's find our subjects. What's the first subject in this times as many statement? Mr. Fraser? No, right, good. So, and this one's tricky because we're not quite comparing Mr. Fraser to Miss Hammett. Our story problem gets more specific here. And now we're thinking about comparing his tiles to Miss Hammett's dice. So really, when we think about our greater subject, it's going to be our tiles and it's greater. If you want to talk about Mr. Fraser too, you need to know that it's Mr. Fraser is the subject who's owning those tiles. And so we see that the number of dice that Miss Hammett has, again, is our lesser amount. Excellent. So now that we've just marked it up, we paid attention to our comparison statement and only focused on to there. Let's now move it into an inequality to have another type of way of comparing it. So let's start with our first comparison statement. What was the greater subject again? Yes, I'm going to go ahead and write it out in a sentence. Let's write it with me. Mr. Fraser's dice is greater than who are we comparing him to? Mm-hmm. Yes, she was the lesser subject, Miss Hammett's dice. Now let's move on to the second comparison in this double comparison multi-step story problem. What's the greater amount? Yes, this was tricky, but we didn't get tricked. It is Mr. Fraser's tiles this time. I'm going to double underline that so we don't get tricked. And it is greater than what? Yes, Miss Hammett's dice. And these subjects are still within the same category. I know from my schema that dice, we can use them in math. A count up from 1 to 6, and then tiles, I've used that as a manipulative before. So that also helps me count or do other kinds of grouping exercises. I wonder what the game is. It sounds like fun. Okay, so we've just marked it up and we completed our 4 steps. So now we're going to go ahead and just step out and zoom out and do our entire cubs so that we can then take our full whole problem understanding and create our keys and our steps. Let's start from the top. Mr. Fraser is getting ready to play his favorite math game with his class, but first he needs to collect all his materials. He has 48, let me go ahead and circle that and underline it because I didn't do that before, dice, which is 2 times as many dice as Miss Hammett has. Mr. Fraser also needs 3 times as many tiles as the number of dice that Miss Hammett has. How many tiles does Mr. Fraser need to play his favorite math game? I'm going to bracket that now because that is our question. Now let's go ahead and move to our final answer statement. Mr. Fraser needs tiles to play his favorite math game. Good, you're done in 3, 2, 1, and done. Let's head up now to our mini unknown box. I'm going to make this space for it now. You can go ahead and do so too. And I'm going to start with my final unknown from the question. How many tiles does Mr. Fraser need to play his favorite math game? I'm going to write tiles needed. Short and sweet. Now we know if we're thinking about tiles needed, well, I know this story problem included lots of multiplicative comparisons. So I'm going to go back and reread to see, well, if we need to figure out the number of tiles, we know the number of tiles is the greater amount. That means I'm going to need a lesser amount and at times as many in order to get all the way here. Let's see if we can get that information to get there. Mr. Fraser is getting ready to play his favorite math game with his class. But first, he needs to collect all his materials. That's just context. He has 48 dice, which is 2 times as many dice as Miss Hammett has. Let me think here. I know how many dice he has. That's a known. But in that sentence, I don't know how many dice Miss Hammett has. She's an unknown. Let's see if we solve that in the next sentence. Mr. Fraser also needs 3 times as many tiles as the number of dice that Miss Hammett has. In this one, it mentions the tiles that I need for my final unknown, and it also mentions Miss Hammett's dice again, but I still don't know how many dice Miss Hammett has. So I'm going to go ahead and write that now as an unknown. So I'm going to write Miss H's dice. Now let's go keep reading. How many tiles does Mr. Fraser need to play his favorite math game? I am now at the question, so I do not have any other unknowns. I have 2 unknowns, so how many steps do I have? You know it, 2 steps. So let's go ahead and split our workspace. You can go ahead and do this with me. And I already know that you know what the titles are. What's the title for A? Yes, you took it straight from here. Miss Hammett's dice. And because I have more space, I'm going to write her full name. What's the title for B? Yep, Miss Tiles Needed. Excellent. So now that we have our steps, let's go ahead and start to create our keys. So we know from the actions in the story problem, we are talking about multiplicative comparison for our first key. TLG. You did so well with telling me this the last time. I didn't even need to ask you because I know you know. Now let's start with just the L and the G by identifying these subjects, and then we can fill in the values. What was the lesser amount when we got to this unknown? Use your inequality or your annotations to help you. Well, in this relationship, let's look. The lesser amount was Miss Hammett's dice. So I'm just going to write HD for Hammett's dice. And what was the greater amount? Yes, it was Mr. Fraser's dice. So I'm going to write FD for Mr. Fraser's dice. Now that we have the subjects, let's go back to the story problem and pull out the numbers or the amounts that was attached to them. Miss Hammett's dice, that's what we're solving for, so we don't have it. Mr. Fraser's dice, do we have that? Yeah, that was one of the only knowns we had, and it was how many dice? Yep, 48. Now we can also fill in the other piece of information that we have, which is what was our times as many in that relationship. Don't get tricked because there's 2 of them. Yes, 2. So I'm going to write 2x. Let's go ahead now to our EQ. T times L equals G. Fill in what we know. What's our T? Yes, 2. What's our L? Yes, question mark. And then what's our G? Yes, good job. It is 48. And I'm going to write D here. And I just want to write a little question mark because we don't know how many dice. Question mark dice. What did you notice about this equation? Yes, it has a blank right here. So how are you going to solve for that blank? You have to manipulate the equation. So how will you manipulate the equation to find a missing factor? What could you use? Yes, the inverse operation. So tell me, what would be a new sentence? This is the number sentence that we have that when we're filling in the blanks for the equation, we can use. but we need to manipulate this equation to help us solve. So what equation would you write to help you solve? 48 divided by 2, nice, equals our question mark. Great job. So we're not going to solve this yet. Let's hold this in our minds because we knew that since we were looking for a lesser amount, we had to divide. That is a big idea. If you want to pause this video and write it down, when we are looking for the lesser amount, we use division to help us solve. Now let's move over to step B. So let's go ahead and write our key. What relationship did we see between our knowns and unknowns for step B? Yes, again, we're talking about multiplicative comparison. So our parts of our key, talk to me. T, yes. What's next? L, yes. What's next? G, beautiful job. Now, where do we start? Start with the T? No, no, no. We start with the L and G because that's where we get tricked. So go back to your inequalities and your markup, and I want you to tell me, what is the L? Yes. So in this case, it is Miss Hammond's dice. She's still the L. And what's the G? Yes, the unit has changed now. It is Mr. Frazier's tiles. Someone write FT for Frazier's tiles. All right, now let's fill in what we know and what we don't know. So do we know, starting with this, our subject, how many dice she has? No. So I'm going to write blank dice because I do know that is this step. So we are getting another opportunity to apply the big idea that we know about multi-step story problems where one answer from a previous step can be used as a known in the next step. And I'm just going to draw an arrow to show me that whatever my answer is from here, I'm using it right there. And then the tiles, Mr. Frazier, we don't know how many tiles you need yet. So we're going to write question mark tiles. We're still trying to figure that out. Let's write our equation. T times L equals G. All right, let's go back. Oh, I forgot something. What did I forget? Check you out. I did forget to put the times as many. What times as many was there? Yes, 3 times. So let's now fill in our key using that. That's 3. What's the lesser amount? We don't know yet. And then what's the greater amount? We know that that's our unknown that we're going to solve for. So now you'll have an opportunity to pause this video and to work through your solves and double checks, and then we will review your answers for each. All right, let's bring it back. Talk to me. What answer did you get for your first step? How many dice does Miss Hammett has? Nice work. She has 24 dice. I loved how you use a tape diagram model to help you double check that. Nice work. We've been working so hard with multiplicative comparison models. Now, we had to bring that over here. So I'm going to write that into the key, 24, and I'm going to write it into our equation. And then let's just double check our equation. Did you have to manipulate this equation? Why or why not? Yeah, we're looking for a greater amount. So in multiplicative comparison, when we are looking for the greater amount, we can use multiplication to help us solve. We do not have to manipulate it and create a division equation because we only use division to find the lesser amount. Nice job. All right, so what answer did you get for this part? Okay, nice work. I love how you gave me your Y, 72 tiles. And again, beautiful work on your diagram to show me that you double checked your work using a multiplicative tape diagram. So, Mr. Frazier, I hope you have enough tiles for your exciting math game, and please do share it with me. So we have just gotten to a checkpoint. And so what did we do to mark up a story problem with more than one comparison? Start us off. Builds on. Yes, I loved how you talked about our visualization. And then what else? Close us out. So let's write that down. So we analyzed it for complexity by thinking through a few specific questions that helped us to pull out how many comparisons we saw in the story problem, and then also who was being compared in the story problem. We then retold it, which helped our mental movie and our visualization, and then we acted it out. So then after we did all of that and created a beautiful, beautiful scene, then we closely read each comparison statement and used our habits to create multiple comparison statements with a greater than or less than symbol or an inequality. And then we still thought about why was all of that important? Well, it helped us to identify the subjects being compared when there are multiple relationships. It also helped us to keep track of those relationships, especially because we needed some parts to help us get to the next part. So now let's think about our big idea. Multi-step problems can contain more than one comparison. What were some other big ideas that you heard mentioned during today? I like that one. Ooh. So this friend over here also mentioned sometimes in multi-step story problems, what you solve for in a one step can be used as a known in another step to help you solve. Nice job. And then, oh, you had one? Okay, so tell me. Ah, so this person is paying close attention to how you solve. So this time when we had to solve for the lesser amount, we needed to manipulate the equation and create a division equation. So keep that in mind. When you're finding a lesser amount, we divide, yes, and you'll have to manipulate your equation. But when we're finding a greater amount, what's different? Yes, we multiply. And since our equation is already set up as a multiplication equation, no work to manipulate the equation there. Just go ahead and solve. So now that we've just unlocked, actually, you're really, really rich because we unlocked more than one big idea. It is now time for us to buckle up as we are about to go ahead and solve independent practice. So you'll have 15 minutes to solve multiplicative comparison problems on pages 26 and 27. Here is your key that you can use as you are referencing and also starting to solve and show your work. Nice. All right, so now it's time for your exit ticket. You will now have 10 minutes to complete your exit ticket on pages 28 and 29. I can't wait to see all of your work and all of your habits. Great work on your exit ticket. Now, just remember, your effort on new tasks will take you further than just aiming for the right answer. It is okay not to always get the right answer. It is what you learn as you're going through that's also very, very important. And sometimes I think we forget that. Can't wait to see you next time. Bye.